Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the monthly Hashkafa in the workplace, vaad. Before I introduce the Rashiva, I just want to take a minute to thank the host, Torah Links, and just share with everybody that Torah Links is looking for mentorship slots for the boys who are coming for the summer. If anybody has the ability to, for internship spots, to have an intern, they should please reach out to Rabbi Grumman. Now, I just want to share two brief stories, and then I'll see. There's in the Hakdama to Sefer Mishnas Pikuach Nefesh, which is all about Pikuach, the Indian of Mesiras Nefesh. There's a Hakdama there that's written by the Mechaber, where he tries to discuss the Torah viewpoint about the Holocaust and about tragedies b'chlal. And he writes that this piece that he inserts in the Sefer there was such an important piece that he had it reviewed by Michael Yehuda Lefkowitz, who looked it over 3 times and felt that this was like a life-changing piece that people should see. And in there, at the end of it, he concludes with a story. And the story is a relatively famous story. He shares a story about a Cantonist, a child who had been raised, stolen away from his parents, and forced into the Russian army. After serving his 30 years for the Tsar, he came back to whatever town he was from, and he was totally minutak from Yiddishkeit. He had no ability to return to his heritage anymore. He didn't know how to read. He didn't know how to write. And he says that on Erev Yom Kippur, this Cantonist walked into the shul, and he sits around. He doesn't really know what to do, where to place himself. And finally, he says as follows. He gives a short speech. He says, "What should I ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for? For Parnasa? I don't need Parnasa. Tsar Nikolai gives me a pension. I'm taken care of. I should ask for Hatzlacha with my children. I don't have any children that I have to worry about. That was stolen from me also. Should I ask for good health? Whatever, whenever it's my time, I'm ready to go," he says. He says, "The only thing that I came here on Erev Yom Kippur to ask about is I want to ask Yiskada v'Yiskada Shvei Rabbah. I want that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Shechina should be Melech La'aretz K'vayda, that everybody should be able, we should feel close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu." And he writes that this is a story that, everyone who was in the shul started crying, and Grace the Rebbe said that moment was a moment of great inflection, a great inflection point in Shemayim. It was a great schos. Now, if I could just borrow the theme from that story, I think that there's a lot of conferences that people could attend, there's a lot of things that people could spend their time getting more educated about, inquiring about. They could be looking to increase their skills in many, many different, tchunas and fields that are beneficial to their life. But this is a room full of people who chose to gather together for the reason of Yiskada v'Yiskada Shmei Rabbah, to learn, to become more inspired and to grow and to infuse HaKadosh Baruch Hu into their daily life in every way. Now, if I could just say one more short story, the Dubna Maggid was famed for his Mishalim. It spawned the whole speaking style of Mishalim. Today, I don't know if it's as popular, but back in the day, it was very popular. Now, the Dubna Maggid was once approached by the Maskilim, who were attempting to mock his, trademark style, and they said, "Give us a pirush on Shir Hashirim," which is Kodesh Kodashim, like the Mishnah Yadayim says, it's the holiest of songs, but give us a pirush on Shir Hashirim that involves no Mishalim. Tell us straightforward, tell us Pashup Pshat. So the Dubna Maggid says, "I'll tell you a mashal." I'll tell you a mashal. He says as follows. There was a young man who had finished his term of learning in yeshiva, and he was ready to go out to work. So his shver, who was a seasoned businessman who had been hosting him in his house for several years, tells him, "Here, I'm going to give you 1,000 ruble. You go out to the marketplace, and I'm going to teach you what you need to know in order to be successful." He says, "Go out there and find something that isn't too rubbed out, and make sure it doesn't have holes. Anything that's rubbed out or it has holes is a problem. Find a product that's not rubbed out and doesn't have holes. You'll be able to resell it. You'll make a good parnasa." On his way out to the market, his shviger tells him, "By the way, when you're in the market, please pick me up a new sieve. I need a sifter for my flour. Just pick me up a sieve." Obviously, the protagonist of our story goes to the market. He spends all day hunting down different products. He comes back with a bag full of things that he thinks he's going to be able to sell. The sieve is nowhere to be found. His shviger loses it. "I asked you for one thing and you forgot it." He says, "I don't understand what you want from me. My shver told me anything that has holes I can't buy." And the shver says, so it's laughing at him, "What an idiot. A sieve is meant to have holes. If a sieve doesn't have holes, it's not a sieve. You don't understand anything." So the Dubna Maggid told them that for me to try to explain Shir Hashirim, which is meant to be complex and meant to be full of Mishalim without Mishalim, is like you sending someone to buy something that doesn't have holes when you need a sieve. So if I could just say, we have the privilege to have the Rosh Hashiva tonight who has the ability to simplify the complex and to straighten out, the different kinks and to understand everything and explain it in a way that's simple to us. And we could be privileged to gain and glean from his Hashkafa Satira, and it's a privilege and a schos for all of us.
Thank you very much. And the derech of Moshel is chai v'kayim, live and kicking. It's intrinsic in the Bria. It will always be around. Ad Yemais HaMashiach vaad bechlal. The concept of explaining things by analogy is inherent. Okay. So, there's a Mishnah in Avos that I think is very appropriate for tonight's gathering, because the Mishnah tells us a chiddush. Shnaim sheyeshvin v'yesh b'neim divrei Torah shchina shrei b'neim. The Mishnah brings a posik, and if we learn the posik, I think kipshuta, we wouldn't understand it the way the Mishnah understands it. The posik is a famous posik. It comes from the Haftarah of Shabbos HaGodel. The Novi describes with eerie precision for those of us that are living in this tkufa and are watching the world around us. He describes how in Ikrus the Mashiach, the world will be verfleizt with kfira. Chozko alai divrechem Omer Hashem va'amatem ma nidbanu alecho. Klal Yisrael innocently says, we've spoken about you. We've said things that are against Hashem. What have we said? Amatem shav avoid elikim. You have said, whether you've said it explicitly or you've demonstrated that this is your hashkafa, shav avoid elikim. It's worthless to serve Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Uma betza kishamanu mishmartei. What's really to be gained by guarding Torah? Chialachnu k'teiranis m'nei Hashem tzvokis. Va'ato anachnu ma'ashrim zaydim. The people that we have to curry favor with are the wicked people. Gam nivnu oisei risha. People build empires based on wickedness. Gam bochnu elikim v'yimaletu, and they get away with it. So there's a current of rebellion in the world. And the Pasuk says, Oz. And at that time, Nidbru Yireh Hashem, Ish El Re'eyu Vayakshiv Hashem Vayishma Vayikosev Sefer Zikaron Lefonav Liyireh Hashem L'chaish V'Yishmai. At the time that there's such a multitude of people speaking Divrei Kfira, blasphemous talk, there's going to be a kaimetz, there's going to be a few faithful Erlich Yidden who are going to get together, recognizing their precarious position as an individual. They're going to come together. Oz Nidbru Yireh Hashem Ish Re'eyu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take note. Vayakshiv Hashem Vayishma Vayikosev Sefer Zikaron Lefonav Liyireh Hashem L'chaish V'Yishmai. Anyone learning these psukim, I believe, would understand kipshutai, that these people that are getting together, these Yireh Hashem, are coming together to be mechazik themselves, to stand up to the barrage of kfira, the relentless, ongoing onslaught of divrei kfira, which they're afraid will erode their emunah pshuta. So they're coming together. What are they talking about? Emunah and chizuk and hashkafa. The Mishnah says, Shnayim sheyeshvim v'yesh b'neim divrei Torah. The Mishnah is talking about two people that are sitting together and they're learning a Tosfos. And they're learning Pshat and Gemara. They're learning a shtickle chumash. Doesn't say it has anything to do with anything that came before, any divrei kfira. So what's the Oz Nidbru Yireh Hashem? The Rambam, in the end of Hilchos Tumas Taras, very famously describes the deterioration of the Baal Lashon Hara, how he goes from one thing to another. V'zeu derech yeshivas haleitzim or reshoim b'tchila ma'am b'divrei havai. A lot of just plagiarize, stam talk, nonsense talk. Kel ksil b'reiv dvorim mitoch kach boin l'sape b'gnus hatzadikim mitoch kach yilachem hegel l'daber b'neviim umitoch kach boin l'daber b'elikim v'kefrim be'ikah. Stamp talk without cheshbon, people don't realize what comes out of their mouth, and eventually they say things that maybe they themselves would be shocked to hear that they're saying, or they don't even remember saying such things. Manit banu alecha. Comment, blog, answer, talk. Dr. Rambam, Zuhi siches harashoim shegeremes lahem yeshivas kronis v'yeshivas knesis sholam eoretz v'yeshivas botim edroshis botim mishtois aval siches ksheira yisroel v'tzadikei. There's a contrast here. This is the talk of wicked people who become drawn by a net of batola and litzonis. Then the Rambam says, upright ksheira yisroel v'tzadikeim eina elo b'divrei Torah v'divrei chochma. Ulefichach HaKadosh Baruch Hu oizer al yodam. The Rambam says, and the Briskerov used to point this out, when we think of a person who only speaks divrei Torah and divrei chochma, we think of the Chazon Ish, of Reb Aharon, we think of Tzadikei Adar. The Rambam says, ksheira yisroel v'tzadikeim, upright people. Ausgehaltene Menschen. Ksheira Yisroel v'tzadikeim eina elo b'divrei Torah v'divrei chochma. They talk about nothing except divrei Torah and divrei chochma. Ulefichach HaKadosh Baruch Hu oizer al yodon umezaka oisan bo shenema oz nidbru yirei Hashem ishare'eu. The Rambam is teaching us that the Ksheira Yisroel are not responding to the Epikuresim. They're going on the derech hayosha, and when they come together, and when they have spare time, they go through a sugya, they learn, they discuss Yiras Shamayim and Torah. It's the contrast that the Navi is pointing out. In every downturn in business, I'm not a businessman, but this is what I've understood over the years, there's always someone who's profiting from it. Whatever is going down, there's someone else who is picking up how you can make a profit from that situation, probably usually a yid. So, at the chush is to realize that b'shas Yerida, you could use the shas Yerida for an aliyah. It's an amazing thing that the greatest Yeridas in Klal Yisrael were the shas Cheta Egel and the Cheta Meraglim, and at that very time, there were certain people who cashed in Kibiyochl in a ruchniistic sense and grew immeasurably. Shevet Levi became Shevet Levi from standing up at the time of the Chet HaEgel. Yeshua and Kalev, Choyu minu anoshim ahem, not to chelkom b'chelik chaverim. So the Pasuk is saying, Adova Niflo, at any time the two people come together and speak divrei Torah, divrei Chochma, it's wonderful. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks around and sees a world that's molei divrei kfira, molei wicked talk, and within this huge, desolate landscape, he finds an oasis of people sitting and coming together to learn Torah. It's moitze chein be'enei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the Navi. That's what the Navi is saying. Oz, at that very time that the world is chozko alai divreichem, amatem shava v'edelikim, people that are coming together, Oz nidru yirei Hashem ishareyu, that creates a tremendous nachas ruach lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as the previous MC mentioned, this is a time when millions, not thousands, millions of people are congregating in all kinds of forums and talking about, at the best, frivolous nonsense, endlessly. And within that talk, the Rambam says, it starts off with frivolities, and it becomes malicious, and then it becomes blasphemous, and people themselves don't realize what they're saying, messages, talking back and forth. And people are spending and engaged in this hours and hours. Their lives are taken up with this. And at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, seeing the world, looks around and Oz Nidru Yirei Hashem Ishare'eu. He finds a chabura of Yirei Hashemayim that are coming together to be mechazik in Torah and Yirei Hashemayim and to find a Hashkafa. It has a tremendous chein that in another time maybe wouldn't be mitzvah so much chein b'einei Hashem as Baruch. It's a given. What's the godless? A Yidden coming together to learn. What then should a Yid do? But in such a time, it has a tremendous cheshivas, and that's a chabura like this is without doubt moitze chen be'enei Hashem. So, I want to share a thought on the Pasha, Rashi really in Pasha's Emor, Hashem HaTeres Kainu. The Pasuk in Pasha's Emor, the Torah talks about Shabbos, Pesach, Omer, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeres. Shabbos u'Mayadim Kulam. And the Ramban discusses, is this really a Pasha of Shabbos u'Mayadim, or is it a Pasha of Mayadim? And the Ramban says that the Oimek HaPshat of the Pasuk is not mashma, that the Torah was coming to speak about Shabbos u'Mayadim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was coming to speak about Mayadim and interrupted with Shabbos. Dabro b'nei Yisrael v'amat aleim moyadei Hashem asher tikru'u oisam mikroi kodesh. I want to talk to you about Mayadim. Eilehei Mayadoi. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu interrupts by saying Sheishes Yom Te'osu Malocho V'Yem Ashvi Shabbos Shabbosim, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes back. Eile Mayadei Hashem Mikroi Kodesh. Let me get back to my subject. Asher Tikru Oisam B'Mayadim. Hadov Tzorach here. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is introducing a Pasha of Mayadim, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring in Shabbos before he begins the Pasha of Mayadim? And this is really two pirushim in the words we say in Kiddush. We say in Kiddush every week, Zeichel Amaisa Bereshis, Tchila L'Mikroi Kodesh, or Kihu Yom Tchila L'Mikroi Kodesh, Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Tchila L'Mikroi Kodesh could mean the beginning of, as in the first. Shabbos is the first of the Mikroi Kodesh. But from the Ramban we understand that this is the Oimek HaLoshon is more mashma like that. It's a tchila, it's a preface. Before we get to the Mikroi Kodesh, b'tchila, the Torah said Shabbos. There's a message over here in the fact that Shabbos was used as an introduction to Mayadim. And Rashi brings a Teres Kainim to explain this. But before we speak about Rashi's Pshat, there's a very interesting tour in Hilchos Kiddush, and I often go to Mishpacha Simchas. Sometimes I see my Krevim, Chassidish Yidden, saying Kiddush B'Slavas Atzuma. And I'm impressed. I stand and watch. Beautiful. And sometimes I'm tempted to ask them pshat in the words that they're saying, because it's not so poshet that everyone knows Pirush HaPoshet. The words we say in Kiddush are Ki Yom Tchila L'Mikroi Kodesh Zeicha L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Where exactly is Shabbos a Zeicha L'Yetzias Mitzrayim? What in Shabbos is a Zeicha L'Yetzias Mitzrayim? This is a question that's posed by Rishonim, Taisus and Psochim. The Torah in Vayeschanan, in the Dibros Shniyos, does say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu only commanded us on Shabbos because we came out of Mitzrayim, Al Kain Sivcha. Otherwise there couldn't have been a Tzivu on Shabbos. But to go so far as to say that Shabbos is Zeicher L'Tzias Mitzrayim is difficult to understand. And the Torah brings a pshat from the Ramban. But then the Torah says that the Pashat pshat over here is, believe it or not, Ki hu yom tchila l'mikroi kodesh sheheim zeicher l'tzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos is not a zeicher l'tzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos is a tchila to the Mayadim, and the Mayadim are zeicher l'tzias Mitzrayim. And the question is obvious, like, what's your point? You're talking about Shabbos. So you want to say not only is Shabbos a zeicher l'maisa bereshis, it's tchila to Mayadim. We have to explain what the Mayadim are. Tchila l'mikroi kodesh sheheim zeicher l'tzias Mitzrayim. Hadvorim tzrichim iyan apirish. Rashi says, why does it bring the parsha of Shabbos? Ma in your Shabbos eitzel mayadis. Again, Rashi understands like the Ramban. This is not a parsha about Shabbos. It's a parsha about Meyadis. The Torah interrupted with Shabbos to teach you something. What is the Torah teaching you? Lila metcho, shebekol ha'mechalel es ha'meyadis, malin olav kilu chilul es ha'shabbosis. The Torah is coming to say that Chilul Yontif is like Chilul Shabbos, and that's why it says Shabbos first. Advarim Tzrichim Pirish. So here, there's words from the Novi, which we learn in the Haftarah of Kiseitze, of Noach. The Novi talks about how our tzoros in Golus are part of a bigger picture of Rachmim. And even though it looks like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is perpetually angry with us, this is really just a window within a bigger picture. Berege koten azavtich, uberachmim gedolim akabtzech. Beshetzev ketzef histati ponai rega mimech, ubechesed olam richamtich. HaKadosh Baruch Hu assures us that He will never forsake us, and however much He's gave a midas hadin chalila, there'll always be an ultimate midas harachman. And then the pasuk says as follows: Ki mei Noach zeisli. This is similar to the story of Mei Noach, asher nishbati me'avoy Mei Noach oid ala oretz. Just like I made a shvur after the story of the Mabul that I won't bring another Mabul, Kain nishbati mikseif alayich u'migal boch. In the same way, I have made a shvur that I will not allow the shetzev ketzev of midas hadin to swallow up Klal Yisrael. And here the question is, talking about Mishalem, what do we need a mashal for? Just like I made a shvur by Mei Noach, I made a shvur here also. What's difficult to understand? I made a shvur, nishpati mikseif alayich u'migal boch, and the Mefarshim Goin Malbim and Chasam Sefer say a very powerful and very fundamental pshat. I'm going to give a mashal. Imagine a person puts together a 27-volume final scholastic history of the United States of America, beginning with the War of Independence until the mid-1970s. And volume after volume, painstakingly researched, and everything is al-tzada yesetoif. The whole set is divided into two parts. The first part is the creation of the United States, what their problem was with the people over the pond, and why they had to leave, and why they had to break up, and why they had to make their own country, and how it happened, and all the details of that. And then everything that happened later is a different set. And here we have to be makdim, lahavdil, a ha'ora from the ha'mek dava, moedik ha'ora. We have in Chumash 5 Chumoshim, and everyone understands, Chalila, this is not for convenience sake. Each one has a theme of its own, and each one is a sefer of its own. And in the Rishonim, they have names based on Chazal for each one. Sefer Breishis is the Sefer Yitzira, the Sefer Abriya. Vayikra is Teres Koinem. Vamidba is Chumash Apkudim, and Dvarim is Mishnah Torah. And Shmois, some Rishonim call the Sefer Hagu'ula. But he brings from the Bahag a new name for Sefer Shmois. Sefer Shmois is Sefer Hasheni, Volume 2. As though we couldn't find a name for it. We couldn't find a name, just Volume 2. What kind of name is Sefer Hasheni? Everything else finds a name. There's a theme, Sefer HaGeula. So this is the mashal to understand this. The person who's writing these volumes is deciding what goes into the set of the creation of the USA and what comes afterwards. So for Shtetzach, the War of Independence and the different aspects of the battle and how eventually it was Yodam al Elyon and how they won, that all goes into the first section. But then they decide the Constitution, the write-up of the Constitution that happened afterwards, that should be the second chelik. And what is the rebuttal to that? The Constitution is the essence of what this was all about. They wanted to have a different kind of government, not a monarchy, a kind of democracy which was good for as long as it lasted. But democracy is the way to go, and the Constitution is going to guarantee it. The Constitution is the pnimius of the first chelik, even if it happened 20, 30 years later. That's the essence of it. So, the Torah. When did Sefer Shmos happen? It happened almost halfway through the 6,000 years that we're in the mid of the 3,000, 2,500 years after Brias HaOlam. So in our mind, Brias HaOlam, the setup of the world, is Parshas Bereishis, Parshas Noach, and the very main figures that set up the world, maybe the Avos HaKadoshim, belong in Sefer Bereishis, maybe. After that, we're finished. The world is set up. Now HaKadosh Baruch Hu took a liking to a certain nation and he made them his. That's a story of its own. That comes later. And the Hamikdavi is teaching us from Rishonim. No. This is Sefer Sheni. This is part 2 of Sefer Bereishis. This is the essence of Brias HaOlam. The essence of Brias HaOlam was for a purpose. And that purpose, the Avos HaKadoshim created a movement. And as Rav Meir Simcha says it in more than one place, the movement could not be consisting just of individuals. It needed a nation. And therefore the Avos HaKadoshim had to have generations coming from them to such an extent that we could create a nation out of it that was going to propagate the message of the Avos HaKoros Hashem Yisborach Ad Seif Kol HaDeiros V'Yad V'Chlal. Klal Yisrael and the formation of Klal Yisrael and everything that there is in Sefer Shmos is the essence of the Tachlis of Sefer Bereishis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, Ki mein noach zeisli. When I say that I don't want Klal Yisrael to be destroyed, it's not just because I love you and I have a special chibah for you. The way you understand that I made a shvua after mein noach, that I will never have another mabul, that's because this is Brias HaOlam. I don't want my world to be in jeopardy. I want my world to exist. Ki mein noach zeisli asher nishbati. Kein nishbati miktzef alayich u'migabach. In the same vein, that I wanted Kiyum HaOlam, and that was the Shvuah of Mein Noach, that is my Shvuah to Klal Yisrael. My commitment to Klal Yisrael is a commitment to the Tachlis of Brias HaOlam. That's Pshat. And therefore, every Friday night, we talk about what we understand are two different things. Shabbos is for Brias HaOlam. There were 6 days, and there was a 7th day, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Manig HaOlam. That's Shabbos. All the Yomim Tovim are for Ata v'chatonu mikol ha'amim, ahavto isonu v'ratzisa bonu. They talk about the connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, which is a beautiful thing. It doesn't have to do with Shabbos. The Torah stuck Shabbos in the beginning of Parshas Emor. Tchila l'mikroi kodesh sheheim zeicher l'tzias Mitzrayim. The Mikroi Kodesh that are Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim are the explanation of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Shabbos, which is Zeichel L'Maaseh Bereishis, is the Yom Tchila, is the Hakdama, which is going to be explained by the Mayadim Sheim Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. As the Torah says, Shabbos itself is not Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. But without the understanding of the Mayadim that are Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim, we don't really understand Shabbos. And that explains our nusach, that we say afterwards, after saying Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim, Vona v'chata v'yisonu kidashta mikol ha'amim. Others are mashmit it, but we say it. Ki vona v'chata. Where does Ki vona v'chata come into Shabbos? Because the Yitzias Mitzrayim and the Mayadim of Yitzias Mitzrayim and the uniqueness of Klal Yisrael is the reason for Brias HaOlam. The Vona v'chata v'yisonu kidashta mikol ha'amim, which is the essence of Yontif, is also the pnimiusdika reason for Shabbos. Shabbos, which comes to commemorate, you can't understand Brias HaOlam unless you understand why there is a Brias HaOlam. The Brias HaOlam is there for a purpose, and what is that purpose? The Mayadim Sheim Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. And therefore Rashi says beautifully that the Torah says Shabbos before the Mayadim L'Lamedcha Shamachala L'Samayadis Ki'ilu Chil L'Shabbos. A person says, listen, it's important for me to be Hashem Shabbos. I'm not kaifa b'maisa bereshis. I accept that God created the world and that He continues to be in charge of the world. All of that I accept. Moyadim, atav v'chatanim mikol ha'amim. That's not important to me. Kol mi ha'mavazeh es ha'mayadis. But I'm not mavazeh Shabbos. And the posuk is saying no. Ha'mavazeh es ha'mayadis. If you don't want to acknowledge the atav v'chatanim mikol ha'amim, if you don't appreciate the uniqueness of Klal Yisrael, if you don't think that you're special, then you're a Mavazah Shabbos also. You're Mechalel Shabbos because you're not understanding Brias HaOlam. It's hard for us in a world where so much is going on, and so much of it is Sinas Yisrael and Chozko Alai Divrechem, hatred of Klal Yisrael, despising who we are and what we are. And for us, in this world, to view ourselves as the Ikr of the Bria, and that everything that we do is so important, B'Eini HaKadosh Baruch Hu, takes Avodas Hashem, but it is the Yesod of what we have to connect Shabbos with Yom Tov. We have to understand that the Bria is here, for this small nation that's attracting always throughout the millennia, and today certainly more than ever, hatred and endless barrage of attacking of all kinds. This is the Tachlis HaBriya. Many years ago, at the beginning of the Warsaw ghetto, Yidden were very despondent, and obviously, and an article was put about by some Catholics, and they talked about the accursed nation, how God is obviously hates the Jews because He's always bringing sorrows to Yidden. And there was a Yid at that time in Varsha, his name was Hillel Zeitlin. He was Nifta al Kiddush Hashem, very interesting person, and he wrote an article, and in this article he said a mashal. And I'm saying a lot of mashal tonight, but okay, I'm making my point. So he said a beautiful mashal. He said, imagine 2,000 years ago, with Wissenschaft, with advanced science, there was somebody who figured out how to get in a spacecraft and to be able to look down with binoculars and see everything that's going on in the world with all its minute details. And this guy's in the spacecraft and he's looking down and he looks into the markets that are going on throughout the world and he sees the boring politics and fighting and squabbling. He loses interest and he starts training his binoculars on the sea. And as he looks at the sea, it's beautiful. It's a sunny day and everything's going fine. And as he's training it throughout the water, he sees different boats going peacefully. And then suddenly he sees something very interesting. He sees one boat. Where that boat is, there's a tremendous storms, and the boat is shaking and lurching from side to side violently. And to his amazement, it's just around the boat that there's a storm. And he can see the boat trying to get away from it, and wherever the boat goes, the storm follows them. So he says this is supernatural. He trains his binoculars very carefully to see what's going on in the boat. And in the middle of the boat, he sees a man who looks like a saint, with a long white beard, surrounded by seemingly simple people. And he sees them shouting and gesticulating among themselves, and they pick up this saint and they want to throw him in the water. And he wants to shout, how can you do this? It's a murder. But he notices, as this saint dips his toes into the water, immediately the storm stops. They pick him up, and the storm's raging. And he says to himself, I guess appearances could be deceptive. This man must be a very heavy sinner if God is bringing such a storm just because of him. And eventually he sees this goes on, and they're hesitating, they don't know what to do, and in the end they throw the man into the sea, and immediately the storm abates, and he goes back to a calm day, and he says to himself, I guess the world should be happy to have got rid of this villain, this terrible person. So this Hillel Zeitlin said, we know that this person was Yonah Hanavi. Certainly not a sinner. And what is it? What's the answer to the question? Why is it happening to him and it's not happening to the other people in the boat? Are they less sinful than him? And he wrote there, he said, those people, who they are and what they are, is not important enough that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring storms if they veer an iota from the course. They don't have such an impact. Yonah is a Navi. He has a mission from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You veer a mashahu from your course, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will go after you with a vengeance, because your mission has to be completed. It's important. And eventually Yonah is forced, without a choice, without a recourse, to come back to his tafkid. And this is what he wrote, a chizuk to other Yidden. He said, here we are in Varshavah Geta, no one is being punished like us, but the reason for that is because Ata v'chatona mikol ha'amim, we are a chosen nation. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a mission for us that is so unique that if we take it lightly and we veer from the course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us reminders. They may start gentle, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu will forcibly remind us of our tafkid. There is no room for veering from our tafkid. We are a mamleches kainim b'goy kodesh. A chabura that comes together to be mechazik in a tipsy-turvy world where Hashkafa's HaTorah is completely ignored, and coming to be mechazik, to hold on to the Yesodus of Amunah, Yesodus HaTorah, Yesodus Hashkafa, Ashri Chelkechem, keep it up, and mazal Allah zeicha zayin, to oz nidbru yireh Hashem, Isha Reyehu, vayakshav Hashem, vayishma, vayikosim, seif zikoran, the yireh Hashem, l'chosh v'ishmoy, and to the Gula Shlema b'meir v'yameinu. Thank you.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.